Welcome to an all-new episode of Her Playbook, brought to you by Kendra Scott. Her Playbook, a podcast highlighting inspiring stories of women in sport and business. My name is Madelyn Burke, and I am joined by NBC Sports lead college football and college basketball insider, Sirius XM radio host, and sports media's Aubrey Plaza. Welcome to the pod, Nicole Auerbach.
It's an honor to be here. I was your first New York City friend, so I also feel like that should be in the introduction.
We have to introduce that. When I moved to the big city of New York, Nicole was the first friend I made there, and it's been great watching your career evolve over the years. And for those just listening to the audio-only version, Nicole is a spitting image of Aubrey Plaza.
I get it a lot.
So we're painting a picture for the audio-only audience.
Yeah, just picture if she followed college football. That's what she would. She's actually like a WNBA fan.
Right.
So I need to meet her at some point. That will happen.
I feel like we need to get you two in the same room. Although if we do, that'll just kind of debunk the statement that you guys are the same person.
This is true. We're working on it.
We'll work our way up to that. Nicole, we're out here at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. You've been covering college sports for your whole career, really, starting at Michigan, USA Today, The Athletic, and now at NBC Sports. How did you know that this was a vocation you wanted to pursue?
I didn't know. I feel like there's so many people in our industry that you have all these either they're writing little game stories when they're 5 years old and they can barely write, or they have little microphone, little kid karaoke sets and they're pretending to be reporters. Not at all. Absolutely not. I stumbled into it. So I went to Michigan, as you mentioned, which doesn't even have a journalism major, let alone a J school, none. They have a student newspaper. So that's where I started. It was welcome week my freshman year, and I was making friends in my dorm, and the girl across the hall from me was a sophomore, and we were just talking about our dream jobs. And I said mine would be to write for Sports Illustrated. I read it cover to cover every day, and she wanted to be a heart surgeon, which she did go to med school and does save lives.
Good for her.
One of us saves lives.
Yes.
And so her friend worked at the Michigan Daily, which is the student newspaper there, and she was like, you should just go to a meeting. I hadn't really made the connection that real people do these jobs, that there was a career path to it.
Yeah.
It was more just I read stuff that arrived in my house. I read Steve Politi because we got the Star Ledger. It was just kind of I didn't think of these as real people and attainable careers. So I went to the student newspaper meeting. It was the day after App State beat Michigan. That was my first game as a freshman.
Okay.
And I watched them tear up. They had this whole special section because they were supposed to be really good. They had Jake Long, Chad Henne, a bunch of guys. They were we're going to come back and win a national championship. So they had all these features that were all prepared to run, tore it all up. And then the 4 student writers did a piece that was what the hell happened? What went wrong? And I just thought it was so interesting that they were able to be experts. They were just seniors, but they were covering the team. They got all the same access as everybody else. They could ask questions in the press conferences, and they could be authorities and write this piece. And also, I was I need to make friends in college.
Right.
I'll pick up a story. And I wrote a story on ultimate frisbee, which was a club sport. It was terrible. I had no idea what I was doing, what to ask people, what's an interesting story. But yeah, that's how it all began. And then I would say that for me to realize this was a career path or something I could do, it was my first internship, which was at the Trentonian in Trenton, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And that was the first job where I was just I was out every night. I was doing Little League baseball and softball, the age group that fed into the World Series. I did drag racing. I did high school sports. I did some Trenton Thunder games. But that was the first time where I was every night showing up at a ballpark or whatever and not knowing what was going to happen, and then you're going to write on deadline and this is your job. Yeah. And I found it so engaging and interesting, and I had no FOMO, this is my first summer after college and all my friends are hanging out every night. And I'm no, I actually really am enjoying what I'm doing. So I'm going to do it as long as I possibly can.
That's fascinating because that's the goal, right? Finding a job that you would love to immerse yourself in. You don't feel left out of, nights, weekends, and holidays when you're covering sports.
And you miss a lot.
You got to really love it. Yeah, you got to really love it. You started your career writing. You've since transitioned mostly to broadcast as well. How has that evolved for you?
Yeah, it's been really fun. I think that it started because when I was at USA Today, less than a year into my first full-time job, there was a major reorg. Mm-hmm. And they made everybody reapply for their jobs, and you could apply for any job. That's how I became a reporter versus I was an editor for my first year. And I just was so nervous. I was oh my gosh, it was it was such a seismic thing to go through so early in my career that you're like, I can't ever, like, I don't want to get laid off. I want to make sure I'm so valuable. So I just was like raising my hand for everything. It was like, here, want to do an Instagram takeover from the Final Four? Yes. Anyone want to do a podcast? Yes. It was just like, I'm going to be as versatile as possible and comfortable in every medium. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I remember like doing radio hits and being so nervous for them, and then just getting better and better by doing it more. And it was the same thing with TV. I was doing studio stuff for the Big Ten Network. And I knew like I had the information, but you have to learn like how to deliver it and like the right length of time. Like, so now then your like body clock goes off when you like feel yourself being too long-winded. So there was just like a lot of that was just by experience, but I wanted to cast a wide net. I wanted to do all of these different platforms to be comfortable on them, and then it created opportunities as well. And I just think like they all feed into each other. So I still can write, but you know, I'll like after 3 hours on a radio show, I might like have an opinion on something. I might have like talked my way into how I feel about something, and then I'll be like, oh, that should be a column too. I should write that. And then, I can make that like a 30-second soundbite on TV on Saturday as well, because this is how I feel about it. But like I worked it out on multiple platforms.
Yeah.
So I think they build into each other. And for me, as someone, you know, again, let's say in college football season, thinking about the same thing all the time, but like thinking about how to communicate it on different platforms is a fun challenge. It's like a creative challenge to go through. So I like that as well, that it's all the same topics, but they're totally different ways that you're addressing them or communicating them or making them effective.
Yeah.
And I like that challenge.
It is interesting too, because covering the sports the way that you do, it's not only keeping up with the storylines and the variety of plot lines throughout the leagues or the teams, but also the people. And one thing that you have always been good at since I've known you, and well before that, is you're really good at keeping in touch and touching base with people and maintaining and building those relationships.
This is why we're still friends, even though I don't live in New York anymore.
Exactly. But it is so fascinating too, because when you look at covering the entirety of college football and college basketball, these are really big worlds. How do you, number one, organically build those relationships and maintain them in an authentic way?
It's really hard because I don't think anyone loves cold calling or cold texting people.
Yeah.
But you have to do that, especially like from a national standpoint. There's not that many opportunities to see everyone in person. So I do try to go to those. Like if there are, you know, like the Final Four, a lot of coaches and ADs and people will be there. Or different sets of meetings throughout the year where you can at least see a lot of people in one place.
Yeah.
And just trying to maximize that, like to the point where like you go back to your hotel room at the end of the night and you just sit in silence for 10 minutes because you're so tired of being on and talking to people.
Yeah.
Which is basically the combine, right, for NFL people. Like it's the same type of experience. So it's some of that and just kind of like forcing yourself to do it. But I think it's just about a curiosity with people. I think you need to not look at everyone you're interacting with as like what they can do for you.
Right.
Or like the transactional nature of like, oh, I hope, you know, when there's the backup center broke their leg, like they'll, you know, give that to me or confirm it for me. I've always viewed it as like, I think, and this is what I always talk when I talk to like students, because I think like they are looking at like ESPN.com or somewhere and they just see source.
Right.
And it's all like, again, injury news, transactional news. I'm like, think about it this way. Like, think about building a relationship where like the third, fourth time you sit down with that person, they're just more comfortable with you. They're more honest. They give you better stuff. You could talk about something maybe that was really difficult in their lives and they're willing to because they trust you. That's like source building. That's more valuable to me. And I remember those stories and those moments more than getting, you know, something before it's released.
Right.
And so it's about like deepening those relationships and watching them grow over a period of time. And you can't speed that up. But that's where like I think that has to keep you going because that's the rewarding part. Like going to cool sporting events gets old because like you said, nights and weekends, you miss stuff all the time. But if you care about building relationships and getting to know people and their lives, then it's interesting. And then you keep up with it. And I also, if anyone is like intimidated by this, I'll give you guys like my tip that I stole from Jay Wright. Because Jay Wright is fabulous at this as well. Like he's so good with people and obviously a college basketball recruiter, you have to be.
Right.
He would tell me that he would have like in his phone, like on the contact page at the bottom, there's notes. And he would write notes. He would write like a wife's name, kids' names, topics that you talked about.
Sure.
So that the next time you bring it up or talk to that person, you remember, like specifically jogs your memory.
Yeah.
And so it's just like little things to, again, like the human pieces of these jobs. And it actually bothers me sometimes in networking settings when like you're talking to someone about like their lives or travel or like things about the hobbies that make them people, and then somebody jumps in and tries to get like a work question in, and you're like, that's not what this is about.
Yeah, don't ruin the moment.
So it's that type of stuff. I don't know. Like, I feel like if that didn't energize me, then I wouldn't want to do this job.
Right. Well, it is fascinating too, because you point out when you were reading Sports Illustrated, for example, and you said, oh wow, these are real people that do this, because I think so often people look at athletes, coaches, media members as ideas instead of real human beings with human problems and human day-to-day, and having those human interactions instead of, hey, I need this from you, hey, I need that from you, is so valuable when you're building a longer career too. And you have been around not just college sports, you've covered multiple Olympics, you've covered so many different sports. Keeping all those worlds safe or keeping all those worlds together is a real skill, and it's something that not everyone can do, and some people can work towards and all that, but it's really admirable. How do you ever just get like fried, like who are all these people in my phone?
Yes, sometimes, but also again, like you cycle through it. Like when there's like a swimming story or an Olympic cycle, it's like fun to get to catch up with people that you don't talk to all the time. When I left USA Today for The Athletic, I wasn't sure I would ever get to cover an Olympics again. But, you're keeping up with them occasionally. I did a podcast series. So again, swimming was the sport that I had covered.
Right.
And I'd covered 2 Olympics at USA Today. I'd gotten to know Bob Bowman really well. Michael Phelps is a longtime coach. Now he's at the University of Texas. But we kept in touch. We were Instagram friends. He coached at Michigan. So like anytime there was like Michigan related things, he would pop up. And so like in COVID, I was doing a podcast series for SiriusXM, and the premise was actually like what we were just talking about hobbies and passions that are not coaching.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, Bob Bowman loves to cook. We should do an episode with him. So we did this like great episode about that, why he loves to cook for people, that gets into his relationship with Michael Phelps and the kids, and he's like kind of a grandpa figure to them and all this. And I'm like, well, why would I have like stopped talking to him just because I didn't know if I would ever cover swimming again, when like we have a relationship? And it was a great episode because again, like it's years of relationships that pay off. And then you just know, and that's also someone when I didn't know swimming very well, I could be like, hey, I have a question, like jargon question, lingo question, like how do I talk about this? Why does this matter? When people, I even asked like on the backstroke, I don't know if you were a swimmer growing up.
Oh yeah, I was lifeguard.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
So you would know this, but like I was like, how on the backstroke do they know when they're gonna hit the wall?
Exactly, that's what the flags are for.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, right?
Yeah.
But like
a lot of people just think they're decorative, right?
But I never was a competitive swimmer. I'm covering swimmers at the highest level. It seems like such a dumb question, but Bob would always be like, no dumb questions. Like I'm happy to help explain. So you need those types of people and those relationships, but then why would you give them up? So that's kind of where I am, and like covering a lot of different topics. Like even this is my first time at the NFL Combine. I don't know a lot of people like on NFL teams, but there's college guys that have gone back and forth, and then there's media people like that. It's great to catch up with, and so I just think you really never know where your career is going to go and where like it's going to be full circle or who you're going to cross paths with. Like the comms person at USA Swimming when I first started covering swimming now runs the Rose Bowl, so like that's like directly in all of the things that I cover. But I didn't know that, right? So you just never know, and so I think it's just valuable to treat people well, and treat people like they're important. Because I've also seen people in our fields dismiss people based on like their current role, right? Or be like, oh, they're not worth my time, or not worth the conversation. And then that person like advances. I remember that.
Yeah, I give this advice to people all the time. It's like, hey, you never know. Your intern could be your boss one day. Life is long, but also all people are people, and if you treat them that way, it's it's a small industry. It's you mentioned the advice that Jay Wright gave you about the contacts, which I think is a really great point, because so often you think, oh wow, I want to ask this person about their vacation or this or that.
I'm not great with names, so like the idea of like keeping track of spouses and kids' names and stuff,
helpful. When you look at getting started in this field in sports media, or perhaps over the course of the years that you've been doing it, is there someone that has stood out to you as a mentor, as an advisor that you really value?
Yeah, so I think in the very early stages, and again, if any students are listening, like really you take advantage of the resources near you. Michael Rosenberg, who's at Sports Illustrated, was a huge mentor for me. He lived in Ann Arbor, so he was a former Michigan Daily editor, and so he would come and do, talk to the students. But like actually using that and like building a personal relationship with him was super, super helpful. Like I remember going through my first job search. He was like an invaluable resource. I remember like calling him like very like anxious and stressed in a hotel room about like an interview and like weighing options of like what path my career should take. He's helped edited stories that were like really important again because you're applying for internships and jobs. So he was just an absolutely invaluable person, and he's such a talented writer and reporter. Like it was a great person to just like aspire to do the job like.
Yeah.
And then honestly, the other big, and you know, you're inspired by anyone, right? So you're watching, you're reading, you're inspired by all of that. But it was really important for me early in my career to have other women at my jobs that like I could directly go to and ask for advice. So like when I was at USA Today, I was really young. I became a national reporter at 23.
Right.
But I had Nancy Armour, who's still there, and then Lindsay Jones, who covers the NFL for The Ringer, and Rachel Axon, who's an investigative reporter. Like I'm still in a group chat with the three of them.
Yeah.
And that was like, you know, over a decade ago that it started. But like they're all at different ages and different points in their career. So like everyone's seen everything. So, you know, even just to have a mentor that obviously you aspire what they've done with their career, but that they're accessible and that they're reachable and that you can ask them, hey, like how should I dress for a baseball locker room?
Right.
It's 100 degrees, but I need to be professional.
Right.
They've been there, you know, and how to, you know, coming up with strategies of like how to ask for contact information as a woman.
Yeah.
And when to reach out to people and how to keep things professional. Like all of those things are really helpful to have people in your corner that are automatically in your corner because you're friends with them.
Yeah.
But also have been through all of these different stages of a career and circumstances. And so I even think like mentor feels like so much more formal than the way I would view those women. But they basically were for me very early in my career.
That is true. And there are so many avenues that you have to navigate differently. Like you mentioned, how to dress, how to ask for someone's contact information, how to do that when you're a woman in a male dominant field. Was there a piece of advice, like if you know, as you're building your sources and you're approaching a lot of these young men and saying, hey, let me get your contact information, how do you do that in a way that is professional? Well,
I would always try, you know, if I was reporting out a feature or doing something or visiting a campus, like to ask for, you know, phone number at the end. I just feel like if I have any other follow-up questions, just trying to like add that like in the, hey, can I get your number if I have any other follow-up, you know, to try to like set the tone that it's professional. I do think that a lot of players and coaches nowadays are so used to having women in these roles and women asking them questions. Like it's not even a question, but you know, there are going to be times where people are like crossing a line or doing something. And the best line I ever got was actually from a male editor when I was dealing with something. And you know, someone crosses a line and is like flirty or trying to ask you out or whatever. And he gave me the best line. I use it and I give it to, you know, women at, like through Awesome, which is Women in Sports Media and other organizations, which is, I trust that that won't interfere with our professional relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
So like someone asks you, I trust that that won't interfere with our professional relationship. And it's just like, it's such a clear line and like, remember you owe me this level of respect. Yeah. That I think is really valuable. But, you know, even when things happen, it's helpful just to have people of like, how do you handle this? Or do I need to do anything about this? I've had editors who were just like, you don't need to cover, like, again, I'm national, but like, I don't care if you ever break news on that team. Like, I don't need you to like put yourself in a situation with someone who's treated you that way. Right. So it's challenging for sure. And that's why I think it's really important to not just have older female mentors who've been through the ringer and all of this, but also like your peers. Yeah. Because you're experiencing it in real time. And so I think group chats and like, you know, our friends in this industry are really valuable with that too. But it's just, again, trying to have clear lines. You control what you can control, which is, you know, how you're dressing, the times you're texting and calling, the tone you're using. And people are still going to cross the line on you. But, you know, just trying, and it's so hard because you do take it personally and you're like, what did I do wrong? But you have to really try not to. And it's very upsetting. It's very difficult, especially when you're young too. So you have the age and gender. It's hard, but again, that's why like it's the support network and people around you, especially when you are trying to work in news and you're going to need to like hit people up and try to get information at times. that they understand that that's a professional relationship.
Yeah. And it is encouraging how increasingly prominent women are in all these roles. And it's still growing and evolving, but it is something that a lot of women still navigate and still deal with, and have to find, I love that line though, and have to find, classy ways to handle it.
Shut things down.
To shut things down, to bring it back to one.
Yes.
Now, you just wrapped your first full season with NBC Sports, doing college football, and you'll be doing a lot of college basketball this spring. How has that transition been to a more full-time network television role?
It's been great. The resources are incredible, and just like the support behind it. Having researchers that can help, and I try to remember and read a lot of things, but just to have people to go back and forth with. I've had more female bosses at NBC in just 1 year than I've ever had in my career, and so that's awesome as well. From audio standpoint, digital standpoint, TV standpoint, it's so nice to also have everything under one roof where it's a clear hierarchy. It's okay, for our show. Okay, and then, let's do some digital video stuff for a podcast. Okay, and then let's write, instead of just kind of constantly feeling guilty and that you could do more on all of these, because I would have, I was working at different places, so I always just kind of felt like I should do more for everyone.
Right.
So that part has been really, really nice. But again, the people have been awesome. Maria Taylor, our host, is just unbelievable. And I knew Maria before I got the job.
You wrote a feature on Maria years ago.
I did write a feature on Maria years ago. Back when we used to live so close to each other. Yeah, she was around the corner. I just her and Holly Rowe. So I knew her. But to see her work, navigating the NFL and college, also with a newborn child, and advocating for me and for other women. And it was incredible, just such a powerhouse. And so it was awesome to experience even more of that up close and personal, but also just help figure out how we wanted to cover college football. That was really cool about being in the ground level there, is they got the Big Ten rights. They had Notre Dame, but they were building up a lot more college football coverage, and it was well, how do you want to do it? And getting to watch it evolve in real time was really, really cool. But it's just everything is first class. It's unbelievable there, and it's just been really cool to work with a lot of women because, as you said, it's a male-dominated field in all areas of it. So to have female bosses has been so cool.
That's incredible, and it's empowering, especially as you're building something from the ground up in terms of that college football coverage. You have done, I remember some really impactful stories that you've done over the years. Is there one that sticks out to you that you think about and you're this one is one that to date I am most proud of?
So I'll give you two that stick out from when I was at USA Today, because one is sports related. So I did a story when James Conner first came back from cancer.
Yeah.
Everyone had put in requests for that. Everyone wanted to tell that story because they knew it was going to be really impactful for readers. And Pitt, based on my other articles, their relationships with me, they were okay, we want you to be the one to do it first, and James will let you talk to his oncologist and everyone involved. And so I was really, really proud of that. And even today, if I ran into James Conner, he would come up to me and give me a hug. It was
you
just
guys almost wrote a book.
Yeah, we did almost write a book. Yeah. It was just it's one of those stories that's always going to stick with you.
Yeah.
And so he was obviously incredibly easy to root for, and still is, with his professional career. But there was a story that, we cover sports. It is usually because, you like sports and games, and it's usually lighter. I've covered a lot of the business of college sports, so it's not light, but not, again, it's different. It's business stories. But when I was at USA Today, I did a story on Jessica Gawi, who was killed in the Aurora Theater shooting. She was an aspiring sports broadcaster. And I just remember when she was killed that there were all these remembrances of, just how much promise she had, how excited she was about the industry. And I just remember being I want to do that story justice. And so I did a year later. Her parents talked to me, her friends, I went to San Antonio, had dinner with all of her friends and family, and they told all the stories. Talked to her parents for 2 hours. They're crying, talking about the worst phone call they've ever received. It's a really, really hard story.
Yeah.
It was also about her age. Sorry about that. And so it was just really difficult, and I wanted to do it right. And I just remember hearing afterwards her brother who did decline to be part of it. He was kind of the family spokesman during all of it, and so I think he was just like not interested in media coverage.
Yeah.
He sent me a DM and he was like, "You nailed her. Like, you really got her."
Yeah.
And so that story will always stick with me because of the degree of difficulty and how serious it was. But also that, like, I did feel like at the end I like captured her, which is always a fear, like when you're writing a profile of someone.
Sure.
But there were stories at The Athletic. I got to do a lot of the goofier side of college sports at The Athletic. Like if someone got memed, like, you know, like the
you did
LSU
a series of
I did a series. There was a girl.
I don't even know how you begin to track down those people.
They were very hard.
Yeah.
There was a girl who was like knitting at a Kansas football game. She was like impossible to find. She was not very active on social media, as you can imagine. If someone brings their knitting needles to a game.
To a game, yeah.
So those were always really fun to do. So I always liked, and that's why I still try to like do stuff on stories on the lighter side. I did like a big Pop-Tarts Bowl feature.
Oh yeah.
Ahead of year 2.
Who doesn't love the Pop-Tarts Bowl?
I really do. They're geniuses. But like, I think it's really important with these jobs. You know, sometimes people take themselves too seriously, but also take sports seriously.
Right.
And I think it's important to be connected to like the goofiest parts. And college football, even more than the NFL, lends itself to goofy and crazy and ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't cover it or touch that or talk to fans who love that stuff, you're kind of you lose some of like what makes it so special, the heart of the sport. So I like to have that very wide range of things that I get to cover.
You got to touch it all. Get you someone who can touch the whole range of it. Nicole, before we wrap this up, I just wanted to get your take on a piece of advice that you would give some of our young listeners who might want to get into this industry, this world, something you wish you would have known earlier in your career, or something that you want to leave the audience with.
Yeah, well, I talked about this, that Michigan did not have a journalism major or journalism school. Don't let that be a deciding factor. I really think that this is a career that you can learn by doing. Mm-hmm. And everyone who's gone through Michigan, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we didn't have those things.
Yeah.
That, you know, it was on us to learn. We didn't have a faculty advisor. It's just like students teaching each other, and you get internships and you learn that way. So don't let that be like a roadblock, you know, or think that you have to go that path in like a very formal J school path to get into this profession. The other thing I would say is like what I was talking about earlier about group chats. I think it's just so important to have people who are your peers experiencing all of this. And that's where like, you know, either through internships or like, I went to like the Women in Sports Media convention early in my career and made a lot of friends there.
Yeah.
And you don't see them all the time, but like they're experiencing the same things that you are, especially early in your career where you're like, well, what if I hate my first job? Or how long do I need to stay at a job before I can make moves? How do I negotiate? Like, they're going through all of that in real time with you. So I think it's really important not just to find mentors, but to find peers that you really connect with and can kind of grow through the industry with. And I think those are the keys to me. And again, the curiosity. Don't do it because you like sports. Do it because you like people and you care about the relationships. You care about the why behind something, not just, oh, it's cool, I get to go to a game for my job, right?
Yeah. It looks good on social media.
That part will fade really fast.
Yeah.
And it's the people that will keep you going.
Well, Nicole Auerbach, thank you so much for taking the time today on Her Playbook. You can find Nicole on NBC Sports as a lead college football and lead college basketball insider, plus on Sirius XM Radio. So grateful for your time, for your insight, and for your friendship. Literally 2 days into me moving to New York, met this one and has been such a gem ever since.
It's about people.
It's about people. Nicole Auerbach on Her Playbook, the Her Playbook podcast presented by Kendra Scott with fashion jewelry, sterling silver and gold vermeil, and fine jewelry collections. Kendra Scott has styles for every day and every occasion at your local New York area Kendra Scott store or kendrascott.com.